I love my daughter, and a part of me is gone. I miss her every day. She's a great impact on society, and I'm her next of kin, and she has a 12-year-old son, and he's without a mother.
Love to Death Channel. Courtney Owens had built something, not handed to her, not inherited, built from the ground up with her own effort, her own name on the door. She ran a car dealership in Snellville, Georgia. She had a son she was raising. She was 34 years old, and she was in the middle of her life, not the end of it. When her mother Andrea spoke about her after she was gone, she said one thing that stayed with everyone who heard it. "A part of me is gone. He has no mother." Courtney had recently ended her romantic relationship with her business partner. The business still connected them. That connection, investigators say, is what got her killed. She didn't know the man she had trusted to build with her had already decided she needed to go. Royal Court Motors sat on Centerville Highway in Snellville, a used car dealership that Courtney and her business partner, Stoney Williams, had built together. On the surface, it looked like a real success story. The two of them appeared in promotional content together, traveled together, posted on social media together. A couple building something side by side. Stoney was 41. He was visible. In the dealership's content on his own social media, projecting a lifestyle that matched the brand. Luxury cars, designer clothing, heavy chains. The images were deliberate, consistent. He knew exactly what picture he was painting. What Courtney didn't know, what most people around him didn't know, was that Stoney Williams had been operating under more than a dozen different names for years, not one alias, more than 12. Sherrod Eric Henry, Jaheim Lamar, Lawrence Tyrell Robinson, ex-Superman, Stanley Williams, Alvin Marcus Williams, and several other combinations on top of those. That kind of paper trail doesn't exist in a person's life by accident. It exists for a reason. And while Courtney knew him as her partner, her co-owner, the man she was building with, she did not know the full picture. Her mother Andrea had only met Stoney twice. She knew him as the man her daughter ran a business with, and nothing more. At some point in 2022, the romantic relationship ended. The exact details of how it fell apart weren't laid out publicly, but by December it was over. They were no longer a couple. The business, though, was still there. The shared stake was still there. Whatever Royal Court Motors was worth, whatever they had built together, Courtney was still entitled to her half. That, according to investigators, was the problem. Stoney Williams did not want to divide the business. He didn't want to go through the process of a split. He didn't want Courtney walking away with her share of what they had built. What he wanted was full control. The dealership, the assets, all of it, without the complication of a co-owner who was owed half. Most people in that situation hire a lawyer, work it out, move on. Stoney hired a 23-year-old named Wesley Vickers. The arrangement, according to investigators, was structured simply. $5,000 paid up front, $15,000 more to be handed over during what was staged to look like a robbery at the dealership. On a December afternoon, Courtney Owens came into Royal Court Motors to do paperwork. Routine, ordinary, the kind of thing you do without thinking twice at a place you own. Wesley Vickers walked in. He was not there to buy a car. He found Courtney, shot her, and left on foot. When Gwinnett County Police arrived, she was already gone. Investigators moved quickly. Witnesses at the dealership had seen a man walk in carrying a gun, shoot Courtney, and leave. That description, combined with surveillance and other evidence, led police to Wesley Vickers within weeks. He was 23 years old. He was arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. But Vickers didn't choose Royal Court Motors on his own. He didn't know Courtney Owens. He had been sent there, paid to be there, by the man whose name was on the dealership right alongside hers. As investigators built their case, something else surfaced. A detail that added a layer to an already ugly story. The $15,000 that Vickers was supposed to collect during the staged robbery? He had allegedly planned to take it directly from Stoney, and take Stoney out at the same time. The man Stoney had hired to kill his ex-girlfriend had reportedly intended to turn around and kill him too. The only reason that didn't happen was because Stoney wasn't at the dealership that day. He had sent someone else to do the job, and in doing so, he had accidentally saved his own life. Less than 2 weeks after Vickers was arrested, on January 10th, Gwinnett County Police issued an arrest warrant for Stoney Williams, charged with malice homicide, felony murder, and aggravated assault. By then, Stoney was already gone. Love to Death Channel. Gwinnett County Police released Stoney's photos publicly. They disclosed the full list of aliases he used, all 12 plus of them, and asked anyone with information on his location to come forward. The tip lines opened. The phones at the Gwinnett County Police Department and Crime Stoppers both made available to the public. Weeks went by, nothing. Then more weeks, a month, 2 months, 3. Stoney Williams, the man whose name had been on a dealership in Snellville, who had posted his lifestyle publicly for years, who had presented himself as a businessman and a partner, had vanished. He had a lot of practice disappearing. 12 names worth of it. About 4 months after Courtney was killed, police in Pasadena, Texas, got a hit. Stoney Williams was located and taken into custody without incident, held at Harris County Jail in the Houston area, facing extradition back to Georgia. Court records confirmed he had been booked on charges of felony murder and malice murder filed in Gwinnett County. The sheriff's office began the extradition process, and Stoney was brought back to Georgia to face what was waiting for him. Both men were now in custody. The case moved into the legal system. Wesley Vickers, the shooter, 23 years old, arrested within weeks of the killing, faced charges of murder and aggravated assault. Stoney Williams, the man who arranged it, funded it, and ran when the warrant came, faced malice homicide, felony murder, and aggravated assault. The prosecution's case rested on the structure of the arrangement itself. The payment, the staging, the deliberate plan to use a hired shooter and dress it up as a robbery. None of that pointed toward impulse. None of it suggested accident. This was organized, funded, and executed by a man who had decided that splitting a business was a problem with one clean solution. The detail about Vickers allegedly planning to rob and kill Stoney during the handoff did not change the core of what the prosecution was building. It added texture to an already dark picture. 2 men, each with their own agenda, converging on the same woman for money. Stoney's defense would have to answer for all of it: the payment structure, the aliases, the flight across state lines the moment a warrant was issued, the 4 months of running. None of those are the choices of someone who believed they had done nothing wrong. Courtney Owens was 34 years old. She had a son. She had a business she built with her own hands, her name on the door, her stake in something real. Her mother, Andrea, said she had only met Stoney twice, knew him as the man her daughter ran the dealership with. That was the extent of it. She didn't know who he was. Courtney didn't know who he was, not fully. Not the aliases, not the history underneath the image he projected, not what he was capable of deciding when the relationship ended and the assets were suddenly in play. What Andrea was left with was the loss. A daughter gone, a grandson without his mother. A part of me is gone. He has no mother. That's the weight that doesn't show up in court records or arrest warrants. It just stays. This case was, at its core, about ownership. Stoney Williams did not want to share what they had built. He did not want to go through a process where Courtney walked away with her half. He wanted the business, the whole thing. And he decided, methodically with a payment structure and a staged cover story, that the most direct path to that was making sure she was no longer alive. He hired a man to do it. He paid up front. He arranged the rest. And then, when it was done and the warrant came, he ran. That run lasted 4 months. It crossed state lines. It ended in a jail cell in Texas. The aliases didn't save him. The distance didn't save him. The lifestyle he had spent years carefully constructing, the cars, the chains, the image, none of it counted for anything when Pasadena police put him in handcuffs. What he had built, he lost. What Courtney had built, he took from her permanently. That is the difference between the two of them at the end of this story. Love to Death Channel. There is a version of this story where none of it happens, where the relationship ends, the lawyers get involved, the business gets divided, and two people walk away from each other with their share of what they built. Uncomfortable maybe, expensive probably, but survivable. Stoney Williams chose differently. He looked at the situation, a breakup, a shared business, a woman who was owed half of everything, and decided that the cleanest outcome was one where she wasn't around to collect. He funded it, he arranged it, he put a price on her life and found someone willing to take the job. And when it was done, he packed up and ran. What the investigation revealed, piece by piece, was not a man who had acted in a moment of anger or panic. There was no heat in this, no argument that spiraled, no single night that changed everything. This was planned, structured, paid for in installments, the $5,000 up front, the $15,000 staged for the fake robbery, the use of a third party to put distance between himself and the act, the immediate disappearance the moment the warrant dropped. Every step of it was deliberate, and every step of it left a trail. The aliases that had served him for years, more than 12 names built up over time, a parallel identity that existed underneath the one Courtney knew, did not protect him. They became part of the evidence, part of the portrait investigators painted of who Stoney Williams actually was, underneath the cars and the chains and the social media image. He had spent years constructing something that looked solid from the outside, a lifestyle, a business, a partnership with a woman who trusted him. He dismantled all of it in a single decision. Wesley Vickers was 23 years old when he walked into Royal Court Motors. He had been hired to kill a woman he had never met, for money, by a man who wanted her share of a car dealership. He carried it out, left on foot, and was in custody within weeks. There is very little ambiguity about what Vickers did or why. He was paid, he went, he did it. But the weight of this case does not rest on Wesley Vickers. He was a weapon that Stoney Williams picked up and used. The decision, the calculation, the funding, the targeting of a specific woman for a specific reason, that belonged entirely to Stoney. Vickers made his own choices. He will answer for them, so will Stoney. Courtney's mother, Andrea, lost her daughter on a December afternoon in a car dealership on Centerville Highway. She lost her to a plan that had been running quietly in the background while Courtney went about her life, running the business, raising her son, building what she had worked for. Courtney's son lost his mother. That is permanent. No arrest, no conviction, no sentence handed down in a Georgia courtroom changes what that child wakes up to every morning. That is the part of this story that doesn't resolve. The legal case moves forward. The men involved face the system. But the absence Courtney left behind, in her mother's life, in her son's life, in the community that knew her, that doesn't close. Stoney Williams wanted the whole business. What he got was a warrant, a fugitive run that ended 4 months later in a Texas jail cell, an extradition back to Georgia, and a case built around every choice he made, every payment he authorized, every name he had ever used to put distance between himself and accountability. He wanted control. He wanted to keep what they had built without having to share it. He wanted to remove the complication of a woman who was owed half. Instead, he lost everything he had spent years putting together, and handed investigators a case with a payment structure, a hired shooter, a dozen aliases, and a 4-month flight across state lines to work with. That was the plan. Courtney Owens was 34 years old. She had a son. She had a business with her name on the door. She had a life she was in the middle of living. She deserved to finish it. For Courtney Owens. And for the son she was doing all of it for. Love to Death Channel. If this case stayed with you, you're probably not alone. Subscribe to Love to Death Channel for more true crime stories covering the cases that happen behind closed doors, domestic violence, obsession, betrayal, and the relationships that turn deadly. New cases, in-depth investigations, and ongoing updates uploaded regularly. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Fair use notice. This video is produced for educational and commentary purposes only. All footage, images, and media referenced in this content are used under fair use guidelines as protected under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act.
Connection to her murder. Atlanta News First, Bridget Spencer joining us here in studio. And Bridget, you got a chance to speak to police in Texas, and that's where Williams was arrested.
Yeah, police believe actually he is the one who planned all of this out. Stoney Williams was arrested in Pasadena, Texas on Friday without incident. Now, police tell me he was transferred to the Harris County Jail and he's waiting there to be extradited at this point. Now, Williams is accused of hiring a hitman to kill Courtney Owens back in December. Now, she stopped by her Royal Court Motors dealership in Snellville to do some paperwork when a masked man walked in and shot her. Now, police say that man was Wesley Vickers. He was charged with her murder shortly after. However, the man police believe the one who hired Vickers was Stoney Williams. Atlanta News First spoke to Andrea Owens, Courtney's mom, back in January, and she detailed her unimaginable loss.
I love my daughter, and a part of me is gone. I miss her every day. She's a great impact on society, and I'm her next of kin, and she has a 12-year-old son. And, you know, he's without a mother.
We are told that Stoney Williams co-owned that dealership with Courtney Owens. The Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office just told me they have already started the extradition process, so they plan to get Williams back here to Georgia as soon as they can. Sending it back over to you.
Wow. All right.